Hey everyone, welcome back to Trainroster. Speed matching is a requirement of realistic operations, but there's a lot of debate how to achieve it. This episode, I'm going to show you how I do it. For this speed match session, both locomotives have ESU LokSound V5s in them. Because of this, I expect this to be easy, as they are both from the same manufacturer and have the same versions. I would like to mention that you can successfully speed match mixed branded decoders and versions, but this does come with some caveats. You might have to disable the BMF load compensation and some other factors to keep the units from bucking. I'm aware of your performance clause in your contract. I'm getting to the point. Canopy's getting all ramped up, so let's head over to the workbench and start speed matching. Let's start off with an overview of the LokSound programming software. A secret about ESU decoders is that they have around 500 more... Canopy? Why are you dressed like you're gonna sue a Class 1 railroad? Oh, no you don't. This episode has no gluing whatsoever. None. There is no legal contract issue that you can throw at me today. What do you mean the notepad looks lonely? The paper on the screen is an image, so you can't glue it. Put your cap back on. Oh, well, that's actually a good point. Canopy reminded me that we just can't start plugging in values to speed match. He's correct, even if he's being a stickler about it. The first thing we need to do is warm up the locomotives. See, electric motor performance differs if the magnets and brushes are cold versus when they're hot. If we match them now, those values will change after 10 minutes of runtime and we'll be right back where we started. So while we get the station set up, feel free to run your locomotive separately to get those electrical juices flowing. Good call, Canopy. Now go back to whatever it is you were gluing. Let's get back to the overview for the LokSound programming software. As I was saying, ESU has around 1500 CV options, roughly 500 more than the typical decoder. Because of that, it's a good idea to know where these options are located and to understand the differences you'll encounter compared to the other brands. Now, I do program all types of decoders, and I use JMRI to program those other brands regularly. So I do understand if you're coming from a different software, the sheer amount of options in these tabs and sub-menus can be overwhelming, but there's a good reason for it. While other decoders give a basic set of options for motor control, the LokSound V5 gives granular access to processes called PID loops and the BMF sampling. This access gives more precise controls for speed matching. But once you see where these specific tools are hidden, it becomes a lot more manageable. Most of these options I'm not going to cover today. I'm strictly addressing the speed matching options. If you're interested in a more in-depth look into the rest of the software, stay tuned. I'm working on a video covering those features. So hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss it. First, let's look at the top menu. We're only going to be using a programmer menu to read and write the decoder data. We're not going to be using the write sound data. That's a separate process for another day. Now, on the left, I'll be focused on just 4 areas: read write CVs, DCC settings, driving characteristics, and finally, motor settings. These are the only sections required to get these locomotives synced. Now that we know where the tabs and options are in the software, we can start adjusting the settings. Now that the motors are warm, I'm going to start configuring the locomotive. I'm going to move it from the main track over to the programming track to begin the setup. I'll start by having the decoder perform an initial self-calibration using the ESU Autotune. It's the fastest way to map the motor's Back-EMF and set the base for everything I'm about to do. I'm making my way over to the Read Write CVs tab. I'll enter 54 in the CV field and put a 0 in the value field. Now I'll go to the right side of the value and click the Write button to save the change to the decoder. Next, I'll place the locomotive back on the main track so I can initiate the Autotune feature that I enabled earlier with the CV change 54 to 0. Now, a word of caution, when I trigger the F1, which is the bell, the locomotive, it's going to take off at full throttle for a couple seconds. Make sure there's plenty of track ahead for the unit. Are you ready? I'm going to launch her. I'm now hitting F1. Now that the locomotive has come to a halt, the decoder has finished measuring the motor's physical response and updated its internal motor parameters. I'll put the locomotive back on the programming track to finish the rest of my manual configurations. Now that the locomotive is back on the programming track, I'm going to go up to the programmer menu and click on the Read Decoder Data. What this does is downloads all the CV values from the locomotive that the decoder just adjusted during the calibration run. Now that the new values have populated the software, I'll just click back over to the motor settings to check out the new values that the decoder changed. I fully expect the K and I parameters to change for this motor. Just out of curiosity, I'm going to check out the changes the Autotune made to the values in the decoder. I made a screen capture beforehand to make this easy. On the left side of the screen is the before Autotune, and the right side is after the Autotune. Check out the adjustments in the regulation reference and the K and I parameters. The decoder essentially listened to the motor's Back-EMF and calibrated the power delivery to match the specific motor's physical resistance. This is exactly why I don't skip this step. It custom tunes the power for the speed curve we'll be installing. Moving into the manual configuration, starting with analog settings. The very first thing I do on every install is disable analog mode. There are several reasons I do this. It improves response from signal noise and avoids conflicts with stay-alive power packs. When you leave DC mode enabled, the decoder is constantly listening to the track to decide if it's receiving a DCC signal or a DC signal. If your track gets a power spike or a signal noise that the decoder misinterprets as DC power, your locomotive can take off at full throttle. By disabling this, I'm telling the decoder to ignore everything except a clean DCC packet. It's the best insurance policy against a runaway locomotive. Beyond safety, leaving analog enabled can cause issues with speed matching. If one unit in the consist is slightly more sensitive to voltage ripples than the other, it might hesitate or creep while the other is trying to move. I want these decoders focused entirely on the DCC signal command logic, not trying to guess what kind of power is on the rails. I'm also going to verify that the CV50 is set to 0. In the ESU logic, this double checks that all alternative power sources like DC or AC are completely locked out. Now that I disabled analog mode, I'm going to write the changes to the decoder and move on to the DCC signal settings. Next, I'm moving into the core DCC settings. My goal here is to streamline the communication between my command station and the decoder. I want this signal to be as clean and predictable as possible. I like RailComm, for the record, but the first thing I'm going to do is disable it. RailComm is a great feature for two-way communication reporting, but it can sometimes cause signal interruptions in a complex consist, especially on older layout wiring. By turning it off, specifically CV29 bit 3, I'm ensuring that the decoder is strictly a listener, which prevents any feedback loops from affecting the speed synchronization. While I'm here, I'm also verifying my speed steps. I always ensure I'm using 28 or 128 speed steps. If one locomotive is accidentally set to 14 steps, while the other is at 128, they'll never match. One will be jumping ahead while the other is still crawling. I'll lock this in at CV29 bit 1. By narrowing the decoder's focus to just these core DCC instructions, I'm removing the variables that cause those tiny, annoying little stutters in a consist. Now that the DCC config is set, I'm going to disable the momentum under the Driving Characteristics tab. Now I'm moving into the Driving Characteristics tab. Here I'll disable both the acceleration and deceleration braking settings so the software will not interfere with the speed matching. In the modeling world, we love momentum for realism, but during the speed matching process, it interferes with the baseline configurations I'm setting. If I leave these on, there's a big lag between my throttle command and the motor's response. By disabling them, I'll get an instant 1-to-1 reaction from the locomotive. I can see real time exactly when it starts moving and exactly how fast it's going to go at every step. Moving down to the trimming options, or better known as the fine-tuning values. I'll adjust these values after the main motor speeds are set. I'm going to start both these values off at 128. On an ESU decoder, 128 is the neutral. I'll save and write all the changes I've made in the LokSound software after I finish with the motor section coming up next. Now I'm moving to the motor settings. This is where I define the speed limits and other performance factors for this locomotive. I'm going to try to set these values as close as I can to match the master locomotive to make the matching process a little simpler. I'm starting with the speed curve. I'll set CV2, my start voltage, to 3. For my mid-range, CV6, that'll go to 40. And I'm capping the max speed, CV5, at 80. Setting the maximum speed at 80 might seem low to some, but for my layout, this works perfectly fine for several reasons. First, I run freight trains, not bullet trains. Second, I'm not a big fan of NASCAR trains. I prefer not to just hear my trains, but to see them as well. My railroad, my rules, right? And for those of you who have smaller layouts, lowering that top speed is just fine. Next is a critical one, the regulation reference, or CV53. I'm setting this to 140. Now, let's look at why. The Autotune I ran earlier set the reference to 73, which represents 7.3 volts. On a DCC layout, like mine, I have around 15 volts available at the track. My bumping this to 140, I'm effectively telling the decoder it has much wider voltage range to work with. This prevents the motor from maxing out, air quotes, too early and gives me the granular control I need to match this unit to other locomotives on the roster. Finally, you know me, I love safety. I'm going to enable motor overload protection at CV124, bit 5. This is purely a safety measure. If the locomotive ever stalls or the drivetrain binds up, the decoder will cut power to the motor before it can overheat or damage the board. It's a smart insurance policy for high-end models. Now I'll write the changes. My boundaries are set, my motor has plenty of voltage headroom, and the safeties are on. It's time to take this to the main track for the physical matching. I want to mention that there is no official speed match standard in the model railroad community. You'll find different factions and opinions all over the internet. With that being said, I value precision. I needed something more factual and practical for myself and for my expensive locomotives, so I created a grading system that I still use today. This system has gone through years of changes and refinements. I've destroyed wheel sets, broken couplers. I even burned up a motor testing a 5-unit DPU stack. To be honest, I still haven't fixed that motor, and I probably won't. Kind of serves as a reminder what happens when I get this wrong. So today I'm going to speed match these units as best as I can. And then I'll run the test to see the results. I use 3 specific benchmarks: short distance, medium distance, and the long distance lap. I'll get into those details once the calibration is complete. I match every unit long hood forward, short hood forward, and in reverse, and then I document every value in my database. And regarding that documentation, I'm currently converting my private inventory database into a public tool that will be free for everyone to use at Trainroster.com. So stay tuned for that. Alright, to kick this off, my first step is to head over to Trainroster.com. Then I'll click on the speed matching menu, and then click on the locomotive speed matching tool. Next, I'll type in the road name and the unit number that I'll be speed matching to the master unit today. After entering this information, I'll head over to the testing area and return later to get my grade. Now I'm moving to the actual speed match. I'm using my UP 3973 as the master. I've placed the Santa Fe unit 209 about 2 feet behind it and MU'd them together. I give myself that 2-foot gap intentionally because it gives me that buffer I need to get into the programming mode on my controller while the consist is already in motion. Here I'm going to open up the throttle to speed 99. That'll be CV5 we'll be editing. Now watch my grape ape hand. I'm going to gently restrain unit 3973 to let unit 209 close the gap to about an inch or so. .209 is a bit fast, so we're going to have to make some changes. So I'm going to grab the throttle. I'm going to press the 209 side of the remote control, hit the program button, dial in CV5. Now remember our speed value, originally it was 80. So I'm going to make an adjustment, keep that around, see, 80, let's try 78. Hit enter, look for the successful good notification, and it's there, good to go. All right, waiting for the locomotives to make their rounds here. Here they come. And it looks like 209's a bit slow. Okay, let's dial the knob to try 79 and hit enter. Wait for the good confirmation. And here the locomotives come again, and it looks like 209 is fast. All right, grab the throttle again, and we're going to adjust this down to 78, hit the enter. I think we're close. And here they come. Yeah, I think that's close. I think we're going to lock that in at 78. I'm going to do a quick gap grade. 209 has a gap of about 2.5 inches. I'm going to head back over to Trainroster.com and plug in that 2.5 inch gap and see what grade we get. I think we hit the tipping point, that spot where a value change of 1 is either just too fast or just too slow. Many modelers stop here, and that's okay, since the distance test at 38 foot with a 2-inch drift nets 209 an A+. But I think she can do better with the forward trim CV66 to see if we can tighten up that drift even more. All right, grab the controller and let's get over there to the value 66. All right, that's our CV66. And remember, we started with 128 as the value. So we want to up that a couple fractions here. So let's see, 128, we'll go to 130. And let's give that a try. Hit enter to lock it in. All right, here they come. Oh, that looks good. Let's head over to Trainroster.com and plug in that 1.5 inch gap and see what 209's grade comes up with. Looks like those fractional adjustments on the magic forward trim did the trick. 209 started with a 1/4 inch gap from 3973, and after 38 feet she finished at 1 3/4. Subtract the starting gap and we got a total drift of only 1.5 inches over a 38-foot run. That's effectively a 99.6 accuracy. Now I want to emphasize, yes, I could probably dial this in even more, but I'm not going to torture myself. This unit is an A+. That means in a consist, there won't be any strain on the components of 209 or other units. Plus the BMF doing its thing, there's really no extra benefit for further tweaking. She's dialed in. Alright, so let's speed match the mid. Well, I usually do this on speed step 15. There you go. Okay, I need to get into the programming mode for 209. Hit that program button. And throttle's a little fidgety after all these years. Almost there. There we go. CV6. And we started 40, so we're gonna try, let's try 38. Punch that in. Well, looks like 209 slacking. Let's give her a little more juice. 39, let's try that. And here they come. And let's see, survey says. Oh, that looks good. Looks good. I think our mids are done. Good job, 209. All right, now I'm gonna unconsist 209 so that I can flip the direction in reverse so we can speed match the long hood forward. All right, so now I'm just going to flip the locomotive around, long hood forward, track the wheels, scooch test. Yeah, a little scooch there. Now I'm going to back it up and just give it some space. I don't need as much space as I did before when I first started this. Okay, so locomotive's in the correct direction. To reconsist back to 3973. Let's get this test going. All right, we're gonna notch this up to 99. Okay, so the 209 slow, and that's expected in reverse mode. Most locomotives are. They crawl typically in reverse. So we're going to go to the reverse trim, hit up 95. Remember, we start at 128. So let's up the value to 129. I'm not sure if this will work or not, but let's give that a try. So nope, as expected. I'm going to go ahead and hit 130. And not enough. Try 131. It's very common. So it looks like 131 was the winner. Looks like CV95 with a value of 131 did the trick. There was a ½ inch separation distance from unit 3973. This means 209 works better long hood forward, earning an A+. but she can run both ways. Now for the crawl test. So we're at notch 1. There is no load on 209 right now, so if you observe the difference in the gap between the couplers for 3973, the lead master unit, stop. Of course, this is why we turn off momentum and braking and all that. You get to see instantaneous dynamic adjustments as the throttle goes up and down. So there's no excessive torque, jumping, or anything with either unit. 209 looks really good. But however, there's no load on here. So we'll have to take a look at that next. All right, so another crawl test. This is with load. So I'm gonna check out the space between the couplers as usual, the distance between the lead unit and 209. In the back of 209, so we have, let's see, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pieces of rolling stock. So we're testing this with load. It looks really smooth. I like doing this kind of test because sometimes the BEMF can compensate for a locomotive that's off when it's under load, you know, the others. So this looks really good. Look at that, no jumping, speed match all the way through, and kind of give you an idea of some of the load she has by herself. And with that, speed matching for Unit 209 is officially complete. For the final stress test, I ran her for 21 laps at both mid and max speeds. I was keeping a close eye out for any bucking, that dreaded slinky effect, derailments. But she handled the rails perfectly. I'm happy to announce 209 has officially made the roster. Now it's time to see all that hard work in action. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the sounds of these units powering their way along. It's a wrap for speed matching Unit 209. It wasn't necessarily difficult, just a lot of steps to get it dialed in. I've been speed matching for years now, but I'm always looking to refine my methods. If you have any tips or a different workflow, please feel free to share. I always welcome your comments and love hearing how you guys handle your fleets. Also, Let me know if there are any specific videos or units you'd like me to cover next. Thanks for watching, and as always, happy railroading.